So I think that was what I did. I made it more personal to me. Like I feel like if I read my personal statement all through the three cycles, I feel like the third one spoke more about me. Like if you're ready, you kind of know more about me. So I think that was what I did differently. Then I networked a lot. I volunteered a lot. I talked to a lot of doctors and like attendings. I shared my story with them. I'm like, oh, this is what it is. This happened to me. So one thing I thought at the time was, oh, graduating 5 years or 6 years after was like a weakness or a red flag. So
The IMG Roadmap is the only podcast dedicated to coaching international medical graduates in success blueprints for this unique pathway. I am Dr. Nina Loom, your host, a previous IMG turned hospital medicine physician, healthcare administrator, speaker, and coach. I empower, encourage, and equip you with actionable steps that you can take towards the residency position of your dreams. Welcome, everyone, to yet another episode of the IMG Roadmap podcast. Today's guest is Dr. Oby Egeolu. She's a PGY2 family medicine resident out in the West Coast, and she has a very unique story to share with us today, so you better stay tuned till the very end. Dr. Oby, can you tell us a little bit about you and welcome to the show?
hi, thank you, Dr. Loom. So my name is Oby. I am a PGY2 resident at Roseburg Family Medicine Residency in Oregon. It's a rural program. So I'm from Nigeria. I was raised up there in Nigeria, eastern part of Nigeria. I did medical school there. I worked for a while there for like 5 years before I moved to the US. Tried residency, took the steps, passed, but I didn't match till like my third application. And I got a master's degree in global health policy. Finally, I matched and I'm here today. I'm happy to be here and share my experiences with you.
Awesome. That's what I like to hear. I like to hear that story of the person who tries and tries and tries, and then the third time is a charm. But I also love that you took several different opportunities along the way, including like how can you diversify yourself and make yourself still marketable even before getting into residency, because when you finish residency, all of that work would be applicable and you can even use it on a much larger scale. So going from a medical school in Nigeria and you moved to the US, how did you even get like the step 1 prep and step 2 prep? Like what was that for you?
So I came in through Kaplan. So I was in Nigeria. I had friends that went through Kaplan before. So I got in touch with them. I'm like, hey, how does this work? And they kind of told me. I contacted them. I did everything from Nigeria. They would give you a letter to help with your visa application and your F1 and all of that. So I did my visa. I got my interview. I got my visa and then moved to the US 2017. Then I think the visa was for like 2 years. So you go to Kaplan, they have like this live lessons, then you just study and you're not allowed to work, just study, study, study. And that was what I did for 2 years. So in that time period, I did step 1, CS at the time, and then step 2, CK.
So I did Kaplan too, but from a Caribbean medical school because I was a non-US IMG, so I needed to come to the US anyhow, one way or the other. And I did Kaplan at the end of my second year, before my third year to take step 1. And it was also for me, really, I did it more so for a channel to get here, to begin to figure out what I was going to do so that I could come to residency here. So I've known that channel has existed, but I like to hear more and more people that went through that process too, especially those of us who are visa requiring IMGs. They gave me an F1 visa to come do it here. And yeah, the F1 visa is limiting in the sense you can't work, but it was good enough for allowing me the time to figure out like the landscape and what I needed to do to stay and to work and to find residency. So I think it's a good option as well for anyone that's listening. So how was your performance on that step 1? Did Kaplan help? I mean, what was the
I don't Kaplan was helpful in the sense that okay, you meet people share their experiences, the resources they're using to study. You can form like a study group and all of those kinds of things. But I think ultimately it's up to you to do the studying and figure out what works for you. My step one score wasn't fantastic. I think I just got like the passing score, like I think 194 at the time. That was what I got. And I think it was maybe for me, I think at the time reflecting, I think it was mostly because I didn't quite understand like how the test works, like the strategies, the study. And also like you can be smart and not like have the highest score. So it took me a while to kind of understand like how like test taking skills, those kind of like context and just studying techniques, I would say. So
Yeah, no, I agree. Like I feel like my performance in step one, I had a 198, which was a passing score at the time, but it was one of those where I didn't understand what I was even doing. I didn't understand the test. I didn't understand like how it was structured. I had no idea what they were doing. Like I was just studying. When I think
yeah.
back on how I studied for step one, I'm like, if I knew what I know now, I probably would have done so much better in all these USMLEs. But you're just going through the motions and you're thinking
Mm-hmm.
about the end goal and you're not really focused on like the right now. So I guess looking back, what are some sort of tips that you'll give like that physician in Nigeria or West Africa that's like looking at taking the USMLEs and they're right now in their home country? What are some tips that you'll give them?
I think first of all, it's just like sitting down with yourself and trying to figure out what are my goals? What do I want to achieve? And necessarily like if you don't have the resources, like financial resources, you don't have to go through Kaplan. I know people that have studied from like Nigeria, and there are places I believe you can take step one without coming to the US. Like you don't have to be here physically. So like if you don't have the financial resources, you can still study from where you are, like anywhere in West Africa, just finding the right resources, talking to people that have studied before, finding out what works for you, how you understand, how you grasp at things. I think that's the advice I would give to you. Just figure out what works for you, where you want to go, what your goals are, take it from there. That's what I would tell that person, that physician in West Africa.
Yeah. And so how did you pivot from that to step two and preparing for it? Because you were already in the US then, right?
Yes, I was. So obviously, like I didn't fail. I just had the passing score. But then I was like, okay, I need to have a higher score for step two CK. And just so I try to figure out what other people did. I joined a study group. I feel like it was very helpful. And so the way I studied for CK was for each question. So for me, it was what are they trying to ask me in this question? Like, what's the context? What's the objective? So I think that was what made a difference for me. And just looking at it from that lens, instead of just going through the questions and just answering them, just for each question, try to understand the concept of that question. And I think that was what I did differently. And of course, like talking to people, teaching people what you know, discussing those concepts with people kind of solidifies that knowledge for you and the concept eventually. So I think for my CK, I got like 230. Or yeah, I think that was what I got. So
Yeah, pretty good score. So now, how do people find these study groups these days? Like, where do they go? So, I may just be somebody that just moved to the US from another country and I'm listening to this podcast and I'm like, I'm looking for a community. I'm looking for where I can find some of these study partners that are reliable, maybe that have a similar schedule. Most of us that first coming, maybe we're not working all the time. So,
mhm.
how do you find these study partners?
So for me, and I think for Nigeria, I don't know if it's just Nigerians. I think there is this WhatsApp group. It's called Kainji. And I also think there's a Facebook group, like study groups. So if you go on there, you would always find like someone that you can relate with. And even if it's someone you can't relate with, just people studying. So I think there's a Facebook and then some WhatsApp group. Even on Twitter, like if you know someone and you just message them and you know people studying for this, and they can introduce you to people studying for like step two or step one or whatever step you're studying. I think going through those channels, social media basically. Yeah.
Mm, yeah, no, that makes sense. So talk to us about, your first application cycle after you finish these exams. Did you also do like observerships, rotations?
Okay, yeah. So after step one, because during step one, I didn't do any of those things. I was just trying to figure out what's going on. And, I'm new to the US. But after step one, I was opportune to, I think I did some observerships then. It was unpaid. Like I just talked to people and they introduced me to doctors that had clinics and I shadowed and observed with them. And that was what I did for the first application. I got an interview, one interview at the time. I went for it, but I didn't match. Then, of course, like the second time, I was okay. What do I need to do? I did a couple of rotations as well, and I didn't even get interviewed for the second time. I couldn't tell you what happened. I just didn't get interviews. Um, I felt like I did what I was supposed to do, but that didn't happen. But I think the third time, I was like, okay, if this doesn't happen this time, I'm just going to figure out what else. Maybe I'm not supposed to be doing this. And I just sat down with myself and reviewed my application, like everything, personal statement. So I think what I did differently the third time is I made my personal statement personal. I think a lot of us just, I know we all have the same experiences, but I also think we learn differently from those experiences. Like we have different lessons that, okay, we may have seen malaria, for example, but we learned different things. We were exposed to different things. So I think that was what I did. I made it more personal to me. I feel like if I read my personal statement all through the three cycles, I felt like the third one spoke more about me. Like if you're ready, you kind of know more about me. So I think that was what I did differently. Then I networked a lot. I volunteered a lot. I talked to a lot of doctors and like attendings. I shared my story with them. I'm like, oh, this is what it is. This happened to me. So one thing I thought at the time was, oh, graduating 5 years or 6 years after was like a weakness or a red flag. So they told me that no, these are good experiences. Tell them what you did in this time period. Tell them that you did this and that, just like you're talking to me now. I think that was something else I did differently. I changed my mindset. I didn't see that as a weakness or a red flag. I saw it more as a strength because I'm bringing something to the residency program from all these experiences. So that was something I definitely did differently. And you can talk to anybody even though they're not like in your specialty. Like I know like the first doctor I talked to was like a pediatric ENT doctor, like a surgeon. Like I was just talking to him and then he introduced me to somebody. Like just like that, I got like strong letters of recommendations. I did like good rotations at good hospitals. Yeah, I think those are like the things I did. And then I took step three as well. Those are the things I know I did that kind of were different from the last time.
Yeah. No, I'm very like just impressed by like even your networking and going to people who are not even within your specialty. I think that there's a lot you can learn from each of these people. And so that always goes a long way. Like if you're, like you said, depends on your learning style. If you're someone who's open to what you can learn from certain people, even if they're not in your specialty, you'll be surprised what you'll benefit if you just like lean in and you're a little bit keen to what they're sharing with you. And then you actually implement whatever it is also that you're sharing with them. So
Mm-hmm.
I was just going through my inbox and I was looking at some of our communication and Google
Oh.
Doc sharing and um if I put your name in my inbox, I see like, I don't know, suggestions from it's so weird. Suggestions from personal statements like change this to this. Oby,
Yeah, we did a lot of that.
yeah. So tell us about your application process, like how many programs you applied into, how did you structure your application?
So these last like the third application, I think I didn't even apply up to like 100 programs. I think I was more focused. First of all, like my criteria was okay, location. I felt like that would make a difference because people want people that live around or in the same region. So that was one thing I really put into consideration. And then what else? Yeah, I think that was mostly for me. That was what it was. And of course, like I didn't require a visa the third time I applied. I already secured like green card at the time, so I didn't require a visa. So I also like I think that also played a role because some of the programs that, like my program doesn't even sponsor visa. So some of those programs, obviously, I feel like if you don't require that, that may be make you more like a stronger applicant. So that was the other thing. I didn't mind. I applied wide. Like I didn't filter based on visa sponsorship. And then I applied to like places that I knew people, obviously, that people can put in a word for me. That was something else I did. And then I had people, multiple peer review my personal statements, my whole application. Yeah, that was what I did. I got a lot of feedback, changes and everything. So, yeah,
And you implemented
yeah,
it.
I implement everything. Yeah,
Because it's one
yeah,
thing to get feedback, but it's another thing to not implement. Feedback doesn't mean anything if it's not used or utilized.
yeah. Oh, I definitely used them. And then, like, it was the whole like back and forth, like, okay, I did this. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah. So
mhm.
let's talk about, did you have any gaps, I guess, in your education? And can you just tell us a little bit about how that may have affected or maybe benefited your application, especially looking back now?
In my education, I didn't have a gap year. Like I went through medical school and then graduated and started working. I think the only gap I would say like I didn't have as far as like clinical was when I moved to the US and up until residency. But one thing I did was even though like when I was studying for step one, I was at the library all day, I would still volunteer like in the hospitals. I would just see what's going on. I just made sure that I was in that environment of like healthcare and hospital setting, even though I wasn't like actively involved, but I always looked for such opportunities. And I think that's what people can do. Like, even if you like are studying, just a few hours in a week, just go somewhere, go to a hospital or clinic and put those in your CV. Everything you do matters. Like, it's just a matter of like how you word it and present yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. Like being clinically relevant, but these days even it's just not clinical relevance, it's also selecting experiences that would speak to your final destination in residence.
Mm-hmm.
So you
Mm-hmm.
just don't want to fill your application with stuff, but make it meaningful, things that you can write about later on. So I think that that's always a good place to start. Let's talk about, so for the other person who is like at home listening to us right now and they're wondering, okay, well, I finished medical school in Nigeria over 5 years ago. I'm working, maybe I'm in the US and doing an MA job or doing something else. What do you recommend for them in this time? Like, what can they do to start working towards their application, towards their residency, towards getting interviews?
I would say, first of all, if you're an MA or you're in a clinical setting or hospital setting, just first of all, identify mentors, I think. Just find people that you can talk to, that you can share your stories with, and people that would help you along the line. Like I said, I was in a hospital, I was doing like clinical research with a pediatric ENT doctor, and I just talked to him. I was like, I'm planning to apply. And he's like, well, I know you're not applying to my specialty, but I can introduce you to someone that. So he introduced me to a pediatrician, and I'm like, okay, I don't want pediatric. But then he introduced me to a family doctor, internal medicine doctors, and that was how I had these, will I say, like rotation offers to actually like observe and even sub-eyes in some cases as well. So I think finding a mentor and being open and honest and authentic, like your best self with them, and sharing your weaknesses, whatever it is, just sharing that with them. And most of them are willing to help. They're willing to help you. They're willing to see you succeed. So I think for me, that was like a major thing that played a role, even though I was trying to get into like match, but I was also talking to people and networking and sharing my CV with people and seeing what I can do. It's just like you said, like that destination. Where do you see yourself and what are the things you know you can do to get there? Even if you don't know, identify someone that is there or your model, your role model, and ask them what did they do to get there. So
Did you do any observerships or research?
Yeah, I did lots of research. I did lots of observerships, some sub eyes as well. I think I did it all. I did everything. I did all of those.
Were they beneficial for you?
They were definitely beneficial in terms of letters of recommendation. So I feel like that's how it was beneficial. I got strong letters from the people that I did observership with.
Okay. And would you recommend that for people that are looking at applying this year, this next cycle, that they can participate in research? If so, how do they find it? Where did you find your research opportunities?
So the research opportunities are, I mean, it also depends. Like if you require a visa, if you require like work visa, so that becomes like a whole different thing. But definitely like what I did, just go on websites and all this. It's hard, it's difficult. I must tell you, you have to be persistent, you have to be resilient. But it can be in form of a job, like applying to be like a clinical research coordinator or something like that. That was what I did because I had like a work visa after my master's. Or if you don't have that, you can just like any hospital, like I know like people in Houston, Houston Memorial, or I can't remember what it's called, but you can go on their website, identify like researchers, email them, their email addresses are there. Just email them and be like, hey, I'm interested in your work. I'd like to be your research assistant or analyze data for you if you have those skills, whatever skills you have. If they don't have anything, they can. I know I had like lots of interviews with like people that were like in when like Philadelphia and stuff like that. And I know I got one global health research from that connection. So go on websites, go on researchers, like research them, get their email them. Most of them would respond to you. And if they don't have anything, they'll tell you, but keep looking. At least that was what I did.
Yeah, I believe in this process, like closed mouths don't get fed, and you have to knock on doors. And that's something that I ingrain in anyone who comes to my program, the IMG room, of course, like it's a majority of it is on networking and getting people comfortable with putting themselves out there, even when it makes you feel like you just want to cringe, right?
Yeah.
You have to be able to put yourself out there because nobody else will do it for you. Like, to be
No,
honest,
but yeah.
nobody is going to take the pain to seek you out. You need to kind of seek it out, put yourself out there, and that's how results is created. So
Definitely.
yeah, so a few more questions to ask you. So as far as like looking at your journey overall, you mentioned the first year you applied, you got 2 interviews, the second year, no interviews, and then the third year, the cycle you did, how many interviews did you get?
I got 4 interviews.
Okay.
So one was from the hospital where I was already doing the research. And then two of them were through open house events that I attended. And then the three of them were from open house events. So one was where I was already working as a research coordinator. And then three was just from open house events.
So open houses are pretty important for people to attend, right? You would say.
Definitely,
Yeah, I almost
definitely.
feel like it's a career fair. It's like a job is looking for people to hire, and it's an
That's
opportunity.
what it is, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a career fair. So when you hear about an open house, reschedule your life so you can attend the
Yep, my three
career fair.
interviews came from there. Like even where I'm at, like I that's how I got the interviews. Yep.
Yeah. So tell us about your global health masters or the global, you mentioned it earlier. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so when I did MAC the first time, my visa was going to expire because I was already out of rounding up with my program at Kaplan. So I'm like, okay, what's the next best thing to do? It was either go back to Nigeria and go back to my job or just stay back here and figure out what to do. So the next best thing was for me to actually do a master's. I really like public health as well. So I was like, okay, why not do master's in this? So I applied to, yeah, master's in public health. I applied to like maybe 4 schools, public health and global health. And then I did that. I feel like it was very beneficial. And that at least as far as like, having that the visa after the master's to work and still be in the US while I figure out match process and everything. So that was helpful in that regard. And also like network as well, even though like even after I did that, even the way I got my permanent residency was through there because I did my master's. I mean, if you're just a doctor too, I think you can. So it's through this process called NIW, which was what I did. So like all the letters I got from there were from my professors from school. They spoke to my research and everything we did together. So I felt like that was very helpful from that regard as well.
Yeah, so that's the national interest waiver, I believe. And
Yes.
for highly professional researchers and intellectuals in the US that
Mm-hmm.
can apply
Mm-hmm.
for permanent residency through that. So I like that
Mm-hmm.
you brought that up because I think so many people don't know about this option. And if you
Mm-hmm.
go right now to uscis.gov and
Mm-hmm.
just type in green card through a physician national interest waiver, it allows for individuals of exceptional ability and individuals who are
Mm-hmm.
members of the professions holding advanced degrees to get a green card. A job offer and a labor certification is required, meaning that you need an employer, somebody's going to sponsor it. And then it can be waived if the petitioner demonstrates that they're granting the petition will be in the national interest of the United States. So
Mm.
your research work or your physician work must be in the interest of the United
Of
States.
the nation, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for you to also be eligible for it. So how did
Mm-hmm.
you learn about this? Because many people don't know about it.
Yeah. So just by talking to people too. So during my master's program, there were like a couple of Africans, West Africans that were there, and just have conversation. So what are you doing after master's and this? And I think one of them brought it up. He had already started the application. And I was like, oh, tell me more. How did you do it? So I went on the website. Actually, the physician one is different. So I think the physician one, you have to already like finish residency or something. But the one I did was exceptional abilities. So MD and master's, or without plus or minus masters. But I think having a master's really helped. So that was how I found out about it. I went on their website. I researched very well about it. I read about it. It's scary because if you don't get it, you can go back home. So, but that was what I did. I think it's worth it to do it, especially for people that haven't matched. It's something you can do to just make you a stronger applicant while you're waiting for another year. And I think I hear now it's faster. So if you apply now before the next cycle, hopefully at least you can get EAD, which is like work authorization, even if you don't get the actual part. Because I didn't get my green card till I towards like half of my first year in residency. I just had the work authorization. So you can have that and go into residency.
Okay. Yeah, because all they need is a work authorization to get into
Mm-hmm.
residency. And I think
Mm-hmm.
people also don't realize that. Like you can apply for residency with an EAD even when you're adjusting your status. And that's, I think, a really good resource. So you were able to apply for the national interest waiver based on your research from your master's degree, or was it research before that?
Just research from my master's degree. But I think you can also, I think what they're looking for is a commitment in one area. Okay, I've done this for this period of time. For the role that I applied for, you don't have to necessarily have a job. I mean, having a job helps, but you don't have to have a job. You just have to show interest in this area and it has to be of national interest. So, as a physician, there are tons of things you can talk about, like just public health in general, period. You can just say that and you're eligible, and that should be of national interest. And I'm happy to talk about it to people that are interested and share my resources, definitely.
Yeah, so just because you mentioned that, where can they find you to continue this conversation?
So I am social media, but I'm not very active. Yeah, it's one of those things. I
Email
just
works too. Whatever works, you just tell us and we put it in our show notes so the audience can click
no,
and
Instagram is fine. Oby Egeolu, you'll find me there. Instagram is fine.
so your Instagram handle
OBY, then EGEOLU.
is it all one word? So the listeners, like if they're driving, they know like, okay, I'm gonna find her later
No,
on.
I think there's a space. So the first OBY, then space EGEOLU.
I think it's an underscore because of times I've chatted with you, which we've chatted a lot. It's underscore if I'm not mistaken,
Oh,
but I may be
okay.
wrong.
Underscore. Okay, great.
Like
Thank
between
you.
Obi and Igaloo. But we'll make sure it's in the show notes so that you guys can
Okay.
go one click and find her. Obi was you were a part of you're a road mapper, right? Like I think in 20
Definitely. It was after like my the first time I didn't match, I was desperate. I was looking for things to help me. So I found out about you, and yeah, I did. I did roadmap during my second application cycle. Yep.
Mhm. Was
Hmm.
it helpful for you? Because we always like to hear the success or this person matched after joining, but it sounds like you didn't match the second time.
No, but I think I don't know. I wouldn't say I didn't match, but I feel like being in a program like that, like a roadmap, I feel like for me, like you always say, I think it's just changing your mindset about your application, your goals, Like it's not a 1+1 kind of, it's not a math. It's just learning those skills, learning the things and applying it to yourself. And you may match and you may not match. So it's just at the end of the day is identifying like areas you need to improve. And I felt like it was helpful in the fact that it changed my mindset, to be honest. I just saw my weaknesses as strengths. And some of the resources you share as well, like how to write this kind of letters, how to word it, and say, like, I didn't know all of those things. So it was very helpful. And in terms of like, okay, seeking opportunities, like I don't know, one of the things you always say, oh, email, just send 100 emails, even if you get no, it's not the end of the world, but keep pushing. So I really like those resources, and the way like you were very positive, and I was really motivated and inspired, I would say.
Well, that's good to know because, a lot of times I get people who ask me, what is the success rate? If I join a program, am I going to match? But like you said, it's not IMG math, right? It's not 1+1. It's a longitudinal process where
Yeah.
what you gain from it is cumulative, like, and can be beneficial beyond the match. And
Yeah.
in some instances, it works the first time of implementing. In other times, it's a cumulative courage, confidence, knowledge that you gain. And then
Mm-hmm.
you are meeting more people, and because you've benefited from here and here and here, it all adds up.
True.
It all adds up. So there's so many other people that played a role in your journey, as well as
Mm-hmm.
your hard work as well. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
can't overlook
Mm-hmm.
that. But it's important that we realize that even the preceptors we're meeting in our way, the meet and greet you're going to, the residents you're meeting, your colleagues that you're talking to, the study group members that you worked with,
Mm-hmm.
they're all part of your story, and they're all
Mm-hmm.
cumulatively responsible for like now being a PGY2 and being a
Mm-hmm.
resident. So as a senior resident, how do you recommend that the juniors approach their application? Especially, let's speak to the person that you could best relate with, which is the physician from West Africa. How can they prepare their application for residency today?
So if you're applying for next cycle, reach out to people first of all. I always go back to that. Because I just feel like this journey is something, it's not one of those things you can do alone. You have to reach out to people, you have to talk to people that have gone ahead of you. You have to learn from people's experiences. And I think before then, even you have to also identify like where do you want to be, where there is life after residency, what do you want to do, what's your end goal, what's your purpose, all those kinds of things. And then from there, you start looking for people that speak to your goal, that would help you get to where you want to go to. And then sharing like, okay, this is my CV, this is what I have, what do you think I can do to make it stronger? And then your personal statements too. I just, like I said, make it personal, share your experiences, even if you have any weakness, so to speak, or even if you graduated like more than 5 years ago, just talk about your experiences, what you've learned, and how you can be of benefit to the program. Because that's another, you have to show that you're a benefit to the program. This is how this is the experiences I can share with the program, and this is how the program can also help me, those kinds of things. And of course, like I believe if you're applying next cycle, you already have your scores. And whatever it is, don't even dwell on it. So scores are good, but it's not the end of the road. Like even if your scores are low, you can still, there are other ways to make up for it. So and have like a positive mindset. And there is nothing like failure. Like there is nothing like, oh, I didn't match, that's a failure on my part. No, it's just a step to reflect and be, okay, what can I do differently this time to make more make me a stronger candidate? I think that those are the things I can say. Whatever you think you can make you a stronger applicant. So your CV, you can volunteer, you can look for observerships, rotations that can be of help in your specialty, and just show commitment to that specialty. I think that's just the most important, one of the most important things. Like if you like internal medicine, just make sure you do things that will show that you're really in love with the specialty instead of just being back and forth. I think programs are able to identify that very quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, being specific to your specialty instead of a shotgun approach, like you need to really hone in and speak to the heart of that unique specialty.
Mm-hmm.
Really want to get their attention and keep it, for
Yeah.
sure. So we really appreciate you coming on. Before you go, we like to know, what is your mantra for success? What is your guiding light? How do you make it through the difficult days?
I like to be positive. I like to say that I like positive energy. So I think that's how I make it through the day. Just having that positive mindset and just being calm. I think I'm a very calm person too. So in difficult situations, I just remain calm. And I think I'm very solution driven. Instead of thinking about the problem, I think, okay, how can I solve this? Okay, do I need to sleep? Okay, I'm going to sleep more or whatever I need to do. So instead of just focusing on the problem, I try to look for ways to resolve it or to solve it actually if I can. And if I can't, I'm like, okay, I can't, and my best is enough. And I think that's what gets me through. And also, like I believe, like if you're doing the same thing over and over again, and you're achieving the same result, then it just means that what you're doing is not working. So you just have to sit back and reflect. And if you want a different result, you just have to do things differently. So that's something else I live by.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing your time with us and your gems. And for anyone listening, if you want to reach out to Dr. Oby, she's on Instagram at dr.oby_Egeolu. I had to go look it up because I was like, that's not her handle. It's dr.oby_Egeolu. So we'll have it in the show notes. It'll be a one click to her profile. And so you can slide in her DMs and message her and ask more questions about the national interest waiver or
Mm-hmm.
any other questions that you may have. Just don't forget to, like she said on this podcast, you just got to keep one foot in front of the other. Even if you're shy, you show up. You just got to implement what people are recommending for you to do. And you too may experience this, whether it's even not the first time or the second time you're playing or the third time you're playing. It is possible. But if you stop, you will never, ever, ever know if it is possible or not. Just remember that. You have to be in the game to win it.
Yep.
All right. It's my pleasure
Yeah.
to have you on the show. Thanks for coming on.
Same here. Thank you, Dr. Loom. Bye.
Look at you. I'm so proud of you for listening until the very end. And because of that, you deserve a reward. And I want you to go right now to drninaloom.com and download any of my free ebooks, whether it's for electives or clinical rotations, or even just whatever trials come your way as you navigate your IMG journey. Stay tuned for another episode coming up next.